Throughout history, humanity has never stopped fighting, not only to defend its lands but to prove its intelligence, courage, and will to survive. Every battle carries untold stories, bold strategies, fatal mistakes, and moments that change the course of the world. Here on Military Tactics channel, we revisit those pages of history to understand why sometimes a single decision can create a legend. Let's begin today's story. In February of 1943, a Soviet soldier tore a frozen flag from the body of a dead SS officer near Demyansk. The skull and crossbones said it all. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were concentration camp guards with tanks. But here's what your history books never mention. When the Red Army discovered exactly who the 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf was, they marked them for death, not just defeat, but death. This is how Stalin's forces hunted Hitler's most savage killers to extinction. Theodor Eicke had overseen Dachau concentration camp. In 1939, he was given a new assignment. Hitler wanted his camp guards turned into soldiers. Not ordinary soldiers, special ones. Eicke personally selected 6,500 men. Every single one had served as a concentration camp guard. They knew how to kill without hesitation. They knew how to obey any order. Now they had tanks. They had artillery. They had a mission: spread terror. They wore a skull on their helmets, the Totenkopf, the Death's Head. Other German soldiers saw that skull and kept their distance. These men were different, darker. One Wehrmacht officer wrote in his diary, "The SS men don't take prisoners. They shoot the wounded. Even we fear them." In Poland, September of 1939, they showed exactly what they were capable of. In Wauer, they locked families inside barns and burned them alive. In Płock, they lined up 300 civilians against a wall and gunned them down with machine guns. A survivor named Jan Kowalski hid beneath the bodies for 6 hours. He heard the soldiers laughing. He heard them singing. These weren't acts of war, this was sport. Franz Kipp served in the division. His diary survived the war. November of 1939, he wrote, "Today we cleared a Polish village. The priest begged on his knees. I shot him in the church, his congregation too. Germany needs this land empty." A survivor named Jan Kowalski hid beneath the bodies for 6 hours. He heard the soldiers laughing. He heard them singing. These weren't acts of war, this was sport. Franz Kipp served in the division. His diary survived the war. November of 1939, he wrote, "Today we cleared a Polish village. The priest begged on his knees. I shot him in the church, his congregation too. Germany needs this land empty." By 1940, every army in Europe recognized the skull insignia. Eicke had built exactly what Hitler wanted: soldiers who enjoyed killing, soldiers who never questioned orders, soldiers willing to commit any atrocity. But these death camp guards had only faced civilians and prisoners. They had never encountered a real enemy. So when Operation Barbarossa began in June of 1941, they would finally meet soldiers who could fight back. On June 22, 1941, 3 million German soldiers surged into the Soviet Union. The Totenkopf division led the killing. They had new orders, the Commissar order: kill every Soviet political officer, kill every Communist Party member, kill every Jew, terrorize the population. In Brest, they executed 200 Soviet officials in the town square while forcing their families to watch. In Minsk, they burned down the Jewish quarter. 3,000 people died in a single day. They photographed everything. They were proud. Near Livatsa, in September of 1941, they captured 200 Soviet soldiers. The prisoners dropped their weapons and raised their hands. The Totenkopf lined them up in a ditch and opened fire with machine guns. Dmitry Petrov watched from the woods, wounded and in hiding. They weren't soldiers, he later testified. Soldiers take prisoners. These were executioners. They shot my friends like dogs. Some were still moving. The SS walked through the ditch, finishing them off with shots to the head. The worst came at Babi Yar, just outside Kyiv, on September 29th and 30th, 1941. The Totenkopf helped murder 33,771 Jews in just 2 days, men, women, and babies. They forced them to strip naked stand at the edge of a ravine, then machine-gunned them into the pit. But the Soviets were watching. Therefore, the NKVD, Stalin's secret police, began keeping detailed records: every massacre, every village burned, every prisoner murdered. They wrote down names, they sketched the skull insignias, they prepared for revenge. Soviet agent Pavel Sudoplatov infiltrated behind German lines. His reports to Moscow were precise. Totenkopf division identified by death's head insignia. Location Sector 7. Crimes: mass murder of civilians, execution of prisoners. Recommendation: no quarter if captured. Winter arrived early in 1941. The temperature plunged to -40. The Totenkopf dug in confident. They controlled vast territories. They had killed thousands. They believed they were winning. They were wrong. The Red Army had regrouped. More importantly, they now knew exactly who they were fighting. Every Soviet soldier had heard the stories: the death camp guards the baby killers, the ones with skulls on their helmets. Mikhail Volkov, a Soviet lieutenant, lost his brother at Lovatsa. He wrote to his wife, "I've seen their insignia, the skull. When I see it, I don't see soldiers. I see murderers. We will give them exactly what they gave us. Nothing." January 8, 1942. Soviet forces surrounded 100,000 Germans near Demyansk. The Totenkopf division was trapped inside. The Soviets knew exactly where the SS units were positioned. Their artillery received precise orders: priority targets, any position marked with the death's head insignia. Continuous bombardment, no ceasefire for medical evacuation. For 105 days, shells rained down on Totenkopf positions every single hour. Soviet snipers were offered bounties for SS insignias. Bring back a death's head helmet badge, get extra vodka rations. Bring back SS collar tabs, earn leave to visit family. The temperature dropped to -45. German supply planes couldn't land. The Totenkopf ate their horses, then their dogs, then leather boots. Men's feet turned black from frostbite. Doctors amputated with hacksaws, no anesthetic. Hinrich Wille served in the division. He survived and later wrote, "The Russians knew who we were. Our wounded disappeared. Other units could arrange prisoner exchanges, not us. If you wore the death's head, you died." Ivan Petrov was a Soviet sniper, trapped in the pocket. He had 31 confirmed kills, all SS. "Each bullet was payback," he wrote. "The SS burned my village. My parents died. Every dead Totenkopf man was justice." By May of 1942, when the pocket finally broke, the Totenkopf had lost 7,000 men, over half their strength. The survivors looked like skeletons. Their once proud black uniforms hung in rags. But the division received reinforcements, fresh recruits who had never seen a concentration camp. So these new men believed they could outrun the division's reputation. They were wrong. The Soviets remembered everything. Red Army units began discovering Totenkopf prisoners shot in the back of the head, not by mistake, deliberately executed. Soviet commanders turned a blind eye. Some even encouraged it. General Vlasov told his men, "The SS are not soldiers, they are war criminals. Treat them accordingly." On July 5, 1943, Hitler launched Operation Citadel. The Totenkopf division was to spearhead the southern assault. They had 140 tanks, including massive Tigers. They believed they were unstoppable, but the Soviets were prepared. They knew the attack was coming. More importantly, they knew exactly where the Totenkopf would strike. Soviet intelligence had been tracking every SS unit for months. Marshal Zhukov gave clear instructions: the SS Totenkopf will attack at Prokhorovka. Concentrate all available artillery on grid 237. When they advance, destroy them completely. On July 12th, the trap was sprung. The Totenkopf tanks rolled forward into the largest tank battle in history. But this wasn't random combat. The Soviets had marked every SS tank as a priority target. Sergeant Mikhail Petrov commanded a T-34 tank. He saw the death's head painted on the turret of a Tiger tank. "That skull made my blood boil," he wrote. "My gunner fired 3 shells into it. It burned for hours. We could hear the crew screaming. We didn't help. In 3 days, the Totenkopf lost 70 tanks, half their armored strength. 4,000 men were dead or wounded. The division's assault collapsed." Soviet artillery captain Yuri Bondarev watched through his binoculars. "We could see the SS retreating, leaving their wounded behind. We kept firing. No mercy for the merciless." German radio intercepts told the story. One Totenkopf officer transmitted, "Under concentrated attack. They know exactly where we are. Request immediate withdrawal." The response: "Negative. Hold position." Final transmission: "Position overrun." A captured Totenkopf sergeant told interrogators, "You targeted us specifically. The regular army units beside us took normal fire. We got everything you had. You wanted us dead." The interrogator replied, We know what you did in the occupied territories. Every village, every mass grave. Yes, we wanted you dead. After Kursk, the Totenkopf never went on the offensive again. They only retreated. The hunters had become the hunted, and the Red Army would pursue them all the way to Berlin. In August of 1943, the Totenkopf retreated west through Ukraine. The same roads they had conquered in 1941, the same villages they had burned. But now Soviet tanks were on their heels. And so every mile of retreat was paid for in blood. The Red Army discovered mass graves everywhere. In the Katyn forest, 4,000 Polish officers were found shot in the head. In Vinnytsia, 9,000 Ukrainian civilians lay in burial pits. Each discovery fueled the fury of Soviet soldiers. Captain Viktor Suborov's unit liberated a village near Kharkiv. They found 300 bodies in a well, women and children. Suborov gathered his men and said, "The SS did this. The ones with the skull badges, from now on take no SS prisoners. That's an order." January of 1944. The Korsun pocket. Another trap. The Totenkopf was surrounded once more, this time alongside 60,000 other German soldiers. Soviet loudspeakers broadcast day and night. "Wehrmacht soldiers, you may surrender. SS soldiers, you will die." For 2 weeks, Soviet artillery transformed the pocket into a wasteland of mud and blood. When German units attempted to break out, the Soviets allowed the regular army through, then sealed the gap when SS units approached. On February 17th, the pocket collapsed. Soviet troops found 800 Totenkopf soldiers who had surrendered. By morning, all 800 were dead, shot in the head, their death's head badges cut from their uniforms as trophies. Hans Müller, a Wehrmacht officer, witnessed the aftermath. The Russians separated the SS from the regular army. "We were sent to prison camps. The SS were marched into the forest. We heard machine guns. They never came back." The division kept retreating through Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. At every border, they abandoned equipment tanks without fuel, artillery without shells, soldiers without hope. By December of 1944, only 4,000 Totenkopf soldiers remained out of 20,000. They had lost 80% of their men. The skull on their helmets had become a death sentence. Soviet troops would spot that insignia and call in artillery strikes just to kill a single SS man. Private Wilhelm Hoffmann wrote his final letter home. "The Russians know our every position. Partisans report our movements. We can't even bury our dead. The death's head means nothing now except our own death coming." In December of 1944, the last organized Totenkopf units were trapped in Budapest. Stalin ordered the city to be taken at any cost. He gave special instructions, the SS. "Totenkopf is in the city, ensure none escape." For 50 days, Soviet artillery reduced Budapest to rubble. They targeted buildings known to shelter SS units. Soviet loudspeakers broadcast the crimes of the Totenkopf in German. "You burned our villages. You shot our prisoners. You murdered our children. Now, you will pay." Inside the siege, Totenkopf soldiers starved. They ate rats. They drank water from radiators. Frostbite claimed fingers and toes. Medical supplies were gone. Men died from infected wounds. Corporal Ernst Wagner kept a diary. "The Russians won't accept our surrender. Other units can give up. We can't. They see our insignia and shoot. We're already dead. We just haven't stopped moving yet." February 13th, 1945. Budapest fell. Of 1,000 Totenkopf soldiers in the city, fewer than 30 escaped. The rest died fighting or were executed after capture. The survivors fled west toward Austria. They burned their SS papers, ripped off their insignias. Some stole Wehrmacht uniforms from dead regular army soldiers, anything to hide who they were. But Soviet intelligence tracked them. Partisan networks reported every SS movement. Radio Moscow declared, "The criminals of the Totenkopf division cannot hide. We know their names. We know their faces. Justice will find them." April of 1945. The final 500 Totenkopf soldiers made their last stand near Vienna. Soviet forces surrounded them. There was no escape. The commanding officer, Helmuth Becker, had two choices: surrender to the Soviets and face certain execution, or fight to the death. He chose a third option. On May 8, 1945, Becker led his men west and surrendered to American forces. He knew the Americans would send him to prison. The Soviets would send him to a grave. Even then, it wasn't over. Soviet authorities demanded that the Americans hand over all SS prisoners. Some were handed over. Those men vanished into Soviet camps. Few ever returned. The 3rd SS Panzer Division Totenkopf began with 40,000 men. Fewer than 1,000 survived Soviet captivity. That's a 97% death rate, the highest of any German division. They believed the skull on their helmets made them terrifying. It did, but it also marked them for death. Every Soviet soldier could recognize that insignia. Every partisan could report their location. Every artillery observer could call in strikes on their positions. Theodor Eicke, who created the division, died in 1943 when Soviet fighters shot down his plane. They found his body with the death's head insignia and left it to rot. Hermann Priess, a division commander, was captured by the Americans, tried for war crimes, sentenced to 20 years, and released after 5 despite Soviet protests. They wanted him hanged. The survivors who made it home never spoke of their service. They hid their tattoos, burned their photographs, changed their names. They knew that somewhere Soviet intelligence still kept lists. Even decades later, they feared a knock at the door. In 1965, 20 years after the war, former Totenkopf soldier Johann Neumann was found dead in Argentina, shot in the head execution style. Local police discovered Soviet currency in the killer's abandoned car. The case was never solved. The death's head insignia they had once worn with pride became their curse. It marked them as Hitler's most fanatical soldiers. It also marked them for systematic annihilation by an enemy that never forgot and never forgave. The Soviets had turned the hunters into the hunted. They used the Totenkopf's own methods against them: brutality, no mercy, complete destruction. The death camp guards who became soldiers learned what happens when your enemy decides you don't deserve to survive. The skull and crossbones was meant to strike fear into their enemies. In the end, it was a prophecy not for their victims but for themselves. Every story in history teaches us valuable lessons about strategy, courage, and the strength of the human spirit. Thanks for exploring today's story with us. Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to discover more fascinating historical stories with us. See you in the next episode, where strategy and intelligence continue to shape history.